Background information on me. I'm a female, and this occurred 2 years ago when I was just 18. This takes place in Maine. Every summer, my family and I go up to camp in the Ellsworth, Maine area. It's about a 3-hour drive from my house. The camp itself is about an hour from the nearest town, and I've been going to this camp my entire life, since my family owns it, and have never had an incident like this happen before. I was watching TV in the middle of the night. Both of my brothers and my parents had gone to bed. I heard a noise coming from the kitchen, and realized that the dogs needed to go outside to do their business. So, I took my brother's 2 pit bulls and my Affin Pinscher outside after turning on the porch light. I walked around to the front yard and let the dogs off the leash. It's so incredibly dark in the woods in Maine that the porch light really only illuminated the porch and nothing else, so I tried to keep an eye on them. I was momentarily distracted when I saw a loon on the lake. When I looked back, I saw that the pit bulls were both looking at something in the woods. I couldn't see what it was, but I assumed they'd seen a squirrel or a raccoon. It was then that I realized I didn't see Alfie anywhere. She's an awfully small dog, and she's completely black. I guess that didn't help me in this situation. I called for her a few times, and heard some soft whimpering right where the dogs had been looking earlier. I took a couple of steps in that direction, and called for her again, worried that she may have gotten her paw stuck between the rocks, or gotten stuck in a snake hole. Suddenly, I felt something moving behind me. I whipped around and looked down, and it was Alfie. She'd been staying close to me the whole time. I just hadn't seen her. So naturally I was thinking, if Alfie is here, then what is it in the woods? I took another step forward, and the pit bulls began to growl. They were slowly advancing, and were now on either side of me, looking right into the black. I quickly picked up Alfie and began to back up, very slowly. I'm not sure what I thought was there, but there are lots of animals in Maine, and I figured the dogs knew better than I did, since I couldn't see anything. Right as I turned around, I heard the most absolutely bone-chilling thing I've ever heard in my life. Coming from the direction of the woods, I heard something or somebody call Alfie's name. It sounded almost as if it were trying to mimic my voice, but it was all wrong. The voice was completely distorted, and it almost seemed to wail. I freaked out and ran inside with my dogs. I have no idea what was out there in the woods. My camp is essentially a log cabin overlooking a lake, and our nearest neighbor, who is also family, lives at least a half-mile in the opposite direction of where that thing was. What do you think? Just to give some background information on this story, I was visiting my grandparents out in Shiprock, New Mexico during the last week in October to see family and go to the Northern Navajo Nation Fair that week. As many of you might already know, many Navajo people, including my own family, are very reluctant to speak about skinwalkers because it is believed to attract their attention. Well, I, however, grew up away from the Navajo Nation and was very naive about the entire subject. When it came to skinwalkers, I was an absolute skeptic. My mom used to tell me a story of how back in the 80s when she lived with her siblings and my grandparents, which is still in Shiprock, but the southern outskirts, about how she and my aunt saw a skinwalker just outside their driveway under a streetlight. She described it as a black dog with dirty fur, a twisted noodle-like front leg, and these unnatural eyes with a soft, burnt orange glow. Me being my own closed-minded self doubted every word, but I never said my doubts aloud. But these doubts totally changed last year when I went to my grandparents' house last October. Me and my family had just finished scourging the carnival at the Navajo Nation Fair and called it a night. The house was close enough where we could walk home in just 10 minutes, so we did. When we got there, It was about 9 at night, where we stayed up until about 2, catching up about family affairs and the local news. It was during that time that I had just decidedly opened my mouth and blurted out the question, "Hey, are skinwalkers real?" And suddenly, the room got dead silent. "You shouldn't be speaking about that," my grandmother said, with almost a very disturbed yell in her voice. I remember it clear as day. So, she and my grandfather both decide to go to bed. After being scolded by my mother, one of my aunts chimes in with a very cautious tone and says, "They're real, right? Had a few start screaming outside my trailer in Farmington just a few nights back. Your cousin had nightmares the whole night and woke up crying that same morning." Not wanting to push the discomfort any further, we all just decided to go to bed. Now, the trailer home is pretty old, and it was a really nice night, so we slept with the windows open, with screens, of course, to prevent any bugs from coming in. Everybody had drifted off to sleep, except me, because my mind was still going a million miles a minute about skinwalkers, and wondered if I ever encounter one while here on the res. As a kid, I was told it's taboo to even think about them, because I can still call their attention. That's when things totally went south. Just as I was settling and finally getting relaxed for sleep, I started to hear something moving outside. I get up from the couch and start wandering over to the kitchen window. In the trailer, all of the rooms have lights outside, so the only visible light that can be seen is from the porch light out front. I was thankful for this because I told myself, if it really was a skinwalker outside, then hopefully it wouldn't notice me seeing it. So I muster up the courage and take a quick scan of outside. From the porch light, all I could see is the dusty ground and the vehicles that my family drove along, with some old metal trash cans that stood beside the road. Looking for about a good 5 seconds, I wasn't able to see anything, so I was getting ready to turn around and walk back to bed, thinking it was just a stray cat or something. Only having taken 2 steps, I hear what sounded like a distorted scream coming from outside, definitely close by. Fear rising, I look outside again, and there I see it. A coyote-like figure staring right at my direction from behind the cars, just outside of reach of the porch light. Only it looked awfully wrong, and gave off an evil vibe just from seeing it. It was gray, with very disheveled hair, and a horrific orange-red glow from its eyes. I noped the hell out, and ran back to the bedroom. It was at this very moment I had begun to also notice an awful stench in the air. It smelled like rotting meat. I began trying to wake up my mother, who was like, "It's 3 a.m., what do you want?" I remember I immediately began in a shaken voice, telling her there's something outside. Then, she said, in a very annoyed tone because I'd woken her up, that it was probably just a stray animal. It is the res after all, and animals wander all the time at night. She obviously wasn't getting the drift of what I was telling her, so I screamed at her, telling her that there's some Blair Witch Project stuff going on outside. That got her attention. She asked me what I was talking about, and then we both heard it. The thing outside started making more of its dreadful-like screams, and started what sounded like a thrashing. I asked her if she heard that. So both her and I got back up, looked outside the window, and the coyote thing was making its way to the door. It walked with an odd limp, and dragged its back right leg, as if it was handicapped. We could hear it start to scratch against the door, and make this odd muffled moaning sound. My mom went and got my dad, and they both started shouting in Navajo all sorts of words, telling the thing to go away, and saying it's not welcome here. Well, all this commotion was enough to get the rest of the trailer up, as they came out into the hallway. The only thing my mother did was turn to them and said "Skinwalker," while proceeding to the point of the door. Noises are still happening, by the way. Apparently, they already knew what exactly to do, as my grandfather got out a handgun from a drawer and a bag of ashes. He coated a few bullets and loaded them into the gun and went straight to the door and fired twice. He yelled out more in Navajo that was too fast for me to comprehend. Nothing. The thing managed to escape before my grandpa could put a bullet in it. He told me that that's the fastest one he's ever seen. Next thing you know, my aunts and my parents are freaking out about what just happened, asking what if it comes back tomorrow, and that it saw us, asking if we were targets now. Afterwards, my grandparents were able to calm everybody down, including myself, saying we'd all be fine. Morning eventually comes, and my grandparents call one of the neighbors over and explain to them what had happened. Apparently, one of them was a medicine man who used to partake in one of the Navajo ceremonies used for healing and curing sickness, and came over to bless each and every family member and the grounds outside. Today, I'm very convinced that what I saw was a skinwalker. I still plan on going back for visits to the family and the Northern Navajo Nation Fair. After all, it is very fun. I just adamantly hope that I never have such an awful experience like that again. Now here's something else. I am going back to stay with my grandparents for a week late next month for a cousin's graduation from high school. And if there happens to be another encounter of any sort, well, now I know where I can share my experience.